All right, Buckeye fans, what we saw last weekend, we've seen before, and what we're about to see this weekend, we have certainly seen before in one way, shape, or form. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, previewing the Big Ten championship game with Ohio State going up against Wisconsin in the wake of another demolition of Michigan in the game. We got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts 247 Sports to talk Ohio State football. Pat, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm good. How about you?
I am doing just fine. And my goodness, here we are, 56 put on the board in the big house. It just continues each year, regardless of the narrative of the Michigan team that comes in that seems to be prepared and ready to go, that Ohio State has completed a 12-0 regular season in which basically, aside from maybe a spurt by Penn State because of turnovers, played 12 complete games, about as well as we could have possibly expected any team in the country to play against that schedule.
Yeah, it's been pretty remarkable, and I think you go back to conversations we had in preseason about Ryan Day taking over as a first-time head coach, and Justin Fields, obviously a highly rated prospect coming out of high school, but we didn't see a ton of him last year when he was at Georgia. And various questions about the offensive line and how would the defense play given their poor run of form last year. And there were just a ton of questions about this team, and we thought they would be good, no doubt. I don't think anyone expected a huge step back, but an undefeated season, the number one team in the country, as we record this on a Monday, heading into the Big Ten championship game. Ohio State's going back for a third straight time, looking to win their third straight title. I mean, it's as you said, it's been more or less a flawless season with a couple examples here. I said to one of the guys sitting next to me in the press box on Saturday when Michigan scored the first touchdown and went up 6-0, that was the biggest deficit Ohio State had faced all year. And the previous was against Miami when they were down 5-0. So when you look at it like that, it's obviously been a great year for the Buckeyes. And one that I don't think a ton of people predicted, but I think people, if you looked at this team, you thought it was going to be good, and they've just done everything right so far. And obviously you still have to cap it off. You want to win a Big Ten championship next weekend, and then you want to go into the college football playoff. But so far, 12-0 regular season hadn't been done since 2013 at Ohio State. And now the postseason and the trophies are on the line.
Yeah, I picked Ohio State to win the Big Ten championship and go to the playoff. I did not predict them to go undefeated nor dominate like they have. I thought that there would be, certainly a progression or development, both in regards to the head coaching spot with Ryan Day and also with Justin Fields in particular. You mentioned that first touchdown scored by Michigan. I've got a Michigan guy that comes on here just about every week, and he talks about his son dismissing this rivalry because he can't relate to it. He's like 10 or 12 years old, and he's
right.
like, we get killed by this team every year. I've got a son who's 23 years old, and he sees all the hoopla. He sees how serious I take it. He basically references all these old people take it seriously, but how can I take it seriously? He says Wisconsin and Michigan State have been the two teams that have given us the most trouble they're the rivals to me. And when Michigan scored to make it 6-0, he actually cheered. He actually cheered that Michigan scored a touchdown because he said maybe we'll have a decent game, which didn't turn out to be the case.
Yeah, it did not. And it was an interesting game, especially in the first half, because Michigan was able to move the ball pretty successfully on Ohio State through the air, over 200 yards passing in that first half. And, Ohio State did not have Shaun Wade, who's been one of their three starting cornerbacks and a guy who, if he chooses to declare early for the NFL draft, will probably be a top 2-round pick, I would imagine. We'll find out about that after the season, obviously. But you clearly saw the impact not having him as that third corner out there. Michigan was able to pick on some young guys. Ohio State played an extra linebacker for a little bit. That didn't work. So Shea Patterson, the Michigan passing attack, was able to move the ball. Problem was, so was Ohio State. And, Ohio State scores, I think it was 4 of the first 5 possessions. They punted once. And Michigan wasn't able to quite keep up. And maybe the most curious part of the whole day was right before halftime, Michigan gets down to the Ohio State 5-yard line and ends up kicking a field goal on 4th down. I think that took the lead from 28-13 to 28-16. And in my mind, that loses the game for you there. You need to score a touchdown. 3 points doesn't help in that instance. So, Michigan needed to keep up. And then the second half, Ohio State obviously made adjustments. Shea Patterson, I think, completed about a little bit over 15% of his passes in the final 2 quarters. They were able to turn Michigan over and whatnot. So once they made the adjustments, Ohio State kind of controlled things from there. And that's obviously when the game got really out of hand. But it was at least an interesting game to some degree in the first half. And, I had people on our message boards and on Twitter, Buckeye fans, that were very nervous all of a sudden after coming into the game, I think feeling pretty confident.
Yeah, certainly it was a game in which, at 14-13, it certainly was interesting. Shea Patterson with 250 yards, as you note, in the first half passing. That was the only thing I was going to bring up in regards to a chink in the armor. But of course, Shaun Wade not on the field. And to go from 250 yards passing in the first half, I didn't realize it watching the game and watching every play until I looked at the box score to see that Shea Patterson went 4 for 24 in the second half. And of course, they had a few drops here and there, but even if it should have been 7 for 24, they really clamped down on defense in the second half. They did give up the 2 scores, but those were related to field position and so forth to a certain extent. They did give up some plays, but and there was a glimmer of hope at 42-27 after Michigan scored twice to get within 2 scores that they might have had a shot. But it was a domination from the most part, start to finish. You beat a top 10 team, roughly top 10 team by 29 points. And it's difficult to find any flaws in that. The offensive line played a tremendous game. Justin Fields, again, 14 for 25 is not a tremendous completion percentage, but the throws count. They are just big throws. They're chunk plays. They're home run hitting plays. And of course, J.K. Dobbins made his bid for the Heisman as well. He was tremendous.
Yeah, I think, you can talk about this offense quite a bit. Justin Fields, obviously he leaves the game with an injury. And I think Buckeye fans probably thought the season had come crashing down when he's laying on the turf holding his left knee. Gets up, goes to the medical tent. 7 plays later, he's back in the game and not only back in the game, but rolls out to his left, moving on that left knee, throws a touchdown, a 30-yard touchdown to freshman Garrett Wilson, who kind of had his coming out party with, I believe, 113 yards in the touchdown. And, so I think Justin Fields quickly put to bed any concern about him being injured. He did say after the game that he sprained his MCL against Penn State, but that the main concern was getting a bigger brace on his knee after he kind of re-aggravated it, and he seems to think he's going to be fine. Those braces, can limit some mobility, but it didn't seem to bother him too much in the second half. You mentioned J.K. Dobbins. This is a guy who probably doesn't get enough credit for what he's done for Ohio State this year. Just, the number of carries he's had in the second half of games, the low number of carries, just because he hasn't been needed, has kept him kind of out of the Heisman conversation. But these last 2 weeks against Penn State and Michigan kind of put him back into the elite running back in the country talk, I think. And obviously those were 2 games that everyone was watching. So you see what he can do, especially when he's given, 30, 31, I think it was in this game, carries, 211 yards. Plus he's, part of their passing game to some degree. I think he had 49 yards receiving. So, a real complete back. He talked about after the game that he's still not satisfied with his play, which is scary to think about. He'll have another opportunity, obviously, this weekend against Wisconsin, going sort of head-to-head against Jonathan Taylor, who a lot of people consider the best running back in the country. And, the receivers, Chris Olave had another big game. He obviously made his debut or kind of announced himself last year against Michigan with 2 touchdowns. He had another touchdown. KJ Hill continued his streak. I think it's something like 46 straight games where he's caught a pass. He caught a touchdown this game. This Ohio State offense is just clicking. Ryan Day's done a fantastic job, even in moving from offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach to head coach, to keep this thing going. And, they're just using all of their weapons. And, it'll be interesting to see as we get into postseason here, if there's a team out there that has a defense that can slow down this Ohio State offense.
Christmas is coming, folks. Do us a favor here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Do your shopping on Amazon. I heard this week that 64% of people in the United States have an Amazon account. That's just mind-boggling to me. But grab the link in the description section below and use it to do your Amazon shopping. Got Pat Murphy on the line to talk Ohio State football with, of course, another Big Ten championship game in play. The Buckeyes' third consecutive trip to Indianapolis, of course, having won against Wisconsin 2 years ago and Northwestern last year. Of course, the score was 38-7 in Columbus. Maybe I'll do a little research this week, Pat, and look up conference championship game, repeat games, and how they mirror or separate themselves in becoming different games than the first time the two teams played, because obviously Ohio State showed to be a much superior team in Columbus, but that was weeks and weeks and weeks ago, and Wisconsin has a lot of pride. They're a good team. They dismantled Minnesota in what was a very close game according to Vegas, and certainly went up there and proved to be the better team on the road.
This will certainly be interesting, having this kind of rematch in the Big Ten championship game. As you mentioned, the game the first time did not go Wisconsin's way, though they did keep it close into the third quarter before Ohio State really pulled away. But this will be a different game, I think. The first game was in inclement weather. It was rainy and cold. Obviously, in Indianapolis, you will be inside in the perfect conditions, which may be an advantage Ohio State. They like to get on that fast turf. They like to throw the ball around, as we were just discussing. So I imagine, though, that Wisconsin will have a different game plan for this Ohio State team. The first game, Chase Young obviously had a huge day, tying Ohio State's single season sack mark with 4 in that game. I think he also had 5 tackles for a loss. Wisconsin tried to block him with just one guy for most of the game. That did not work, and I imagine they will do things differently. Probably look a little bit at what Michigan did this past week, as they were able to kind of keep Chase Young in check. But not only that, you need to get Jonathan Taylor going. He's not had good games against Ohio State. Wisconsin will need to figure out some of the passing attack with Jack Cohn and some of these receivers and tight ends. They just need to be able to move the ball better against Ohio State. And then obviously slowing down this offense and figuring out a way to do that. As I mentioned, I think that's probably the trickiest thing for anybody playing Ohio State right now. So, both teams will definitely scheme things up differently, I imagine. Ohio State, looking at the Wisconsin defense, they know they were able to move the ball, but how does Wisconsin adjust? And then you have to adjust to that. But as we've seen all season, Ohio State's done a great job both offensively and defensively adjusting when teams have done things that they didn't show on film or just had some success. So I have faith in the Ohio State coaching staff, but I do also think Wisconsin will come with a better game plan in round 2, so to speak.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I think the second time around is a more competitive game. Obviously, you've got a revenge factor, which I think is overplayed, but there is some incentive for a team that just got beat versus the team that won and thinks, okay, we're better, even if they try to defend against that mentality. It's just human nature to say we beat them once, especially if we beat them by 31. And then also you've got the strategic element of, okay, we did all these things wrong and they did all these things right. So we've got to counter that and change versus, okay, well, we beat them down by 31 points. Should we do anything different? Or should we just do the same thing because it worked the first time? So why change it? And certainly those guys know what they're doing and will game plan accordingly. We got Pat Murphy on the line talking Ohio State football. Of course, the Big Ten championship game's right in front of us with Wisconsin taking Ohio State on. I hate to go back to the Michigan game, but I should have stated this at the time and gotten your thoughts. It was interesting to see, of course, you were at the game working, so you didn't necessarily see this on the game broadcast, but Ryan Day was interviewed on the field right after the final gun, and he was very emotional about the win. And I think it just shows, again, that despite the score, the records, everything, that he carried a lot of weight and responsibility going into this game thinking, okay, Urban Meyer 7-0, and wow, this is a big responsibility because I can't let this one go. And this is what this game means to this state. And you could just see it. He was relieved, and he understood the responsibility that he had, even being not an Ohioan, of carrying this game.
Definitely. He talked after the game in the post-game press conference we were in about just that, coming in, following a guy like Urban Meyer, even the job that Jim Tressel did going 9-1 against Michigan, he knew that this was important, and he knew that it was important for him to get off to a good start against this team's rivals. Obviously, we talked about it. They were 11-0. They're the number one team in the country going into this game, but you lose to Michigan. Even if you do go in and win the Big Ten, and you eventually play for a national championship, perhaps losing to Michigan your first year was not going to be good. It was just going to take some of the shine off of what had been such a great season in Ryan Day's first year. So he used the same word you did, relief, that they got through it unscathed, obviously controlled the game for the most part. And I agree. You could see that it just meant a lot to him. And I think from a Buckeye fan perspective, you want to see that, even if, Ohio State does win this game, but Ryan Day, downplays it or something like that, which I don't think he would do, having worked under Urban Meyer. But you're happy to see the emotion that he feels, as much excitement about beating Michigan as Ohio State fans do. And you could definitely tell that. I think it was evident throughout. And even when they showed clips of him on the sideline, celebrating different plays, it was very clear that this game meant a lot. And I think Ohio State fans will very much appreciate that. And it's a good sign going forward, too, because he's not going to diminish this rivalry or not take it seriously, in case anyone was worried about that after the score that they put up.
So to spin it forward in regards to the significance of this game, I don't want to be the person asking Ryan Day or players this question, but somebody will at some point to basically say, in some semblance of words, you could probably lose this game and still make the playoff. I'm sure that's not creeping into their mentality. Of course, they want to win the Big Ten championship and secure the playoff bid. But, there's obvious talk out there that they've secured a spot. They're good to go unless they go out there and lose 45-0, that they're in the playoff.
Yeah, I think that they, are very focused on, and they've done this all season, on each game and winning each game. Ryan Day talked after the game about, the difficulty of going 12-0, and that's something that he and the team are proud of. Well, now you want to take it the step further and go 13-0, get a third straight Big Ten title, the first Big Ten title, obviously, under his head coaching watch, and have that momentum continuing to build as you go into the college football playoff. I agree with you and those who have said that I think that they're probably in, unless it's a bad loss to Wisconsin. I think it would be interesting to see how the committee handles something like that, whether it be Ohio State or if LSU were to lose to Georgia, how you shift things around there. But I do think Ohio State's most likely in, no matter what happens. But I think this team is very focused. Goal number 1 is to beat Michigan. Goal number 2 is to win the Big Ten. And then you go, from there to the national championship and the college football playoff. So they've accomplished one of them. And this week it'll be all focused on Wisconsin and getting that Big Ten title and, continuing the undefeated season.
All right. And as things turned out with the Justin Fields health situation, he only carried the ball 6 times. I know he got beat up, he got roughed up, so I'm not downgrading that he had an easy game by any stretch. But in terms of having to run him, and that's certainly something we addressed last week, that Justin Fields was able to get through the ball game and let J.K. Dobbins do most of the running, and didn't have to carry that on himself. And that's obviously something that's going to be monitored again going into this game in regards to the approach of Justin Fields. How much do we use him on the ground?
Yeah, I think they've shown that they are willing to use Justin Fields to run when they need to. They did it against Penn State. They did it some against Michigan State and Wisconsin in the first game. But I just don't think that they're going to do that unless they have to. Given the depth at quarterback or lack thereof for Ohio State, Chris Chuganoff, who came into the game, is the primary backup, and he's backed up by Gunnar Hoke. But those are both guys who transferred to Ohio State, and not necessarily that same level as Justin Fields. Could they come in and win you a game if they needed to? Potentially, but now you're talking about playing against top 10 teams pretty much here on out, and you would want to have Justin Fields as healthy as possible for those type of games. So they're going to try and protect him as much as they can if they need him to run. He certainly is shown capable, and Ohio State has used that at some point. But with the way J.K. Dobbins is playing, with the way they're able to throw the ball, if you can keep Justin Fields upright and not have to have him take any extra hits, that's probably the best case scenario for Ohio State. Now, once you get into a potential playoff game, I think he'll need to run some, like we've seen a little bit this season. It's just teams will try and take certain things away, and if he's a dual threat quarterback for a reason, and using those legs is important to his game. It's just being smart about it, not taking the hit, sliding when you can, so even throwing the ball out of bounds if there's nothing there and there's not a running lane, those type of things. And he's done a good job with that this year. It would be interesting to see in some sort of alternate reality if Ohio State had a little bit more depth, or maybe next year when they will with guys coming in, if they run Justin Fields more or do some designed plays. But for this year, it's worked out with the way they've handled it, and I think they'll continue that approach.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, talking Ohio State, Wisconsin, another Big Ten championship game for the third time, let's see, since 2014. So that's 3 times in 6 seasons these two have matched up. Wisconsin, despite Minnesota's bid, Nebraska's hype in the preseason, emerges again as the best team in the West. Please join Pat Murphy and the rest of the staff there at Bucknuts on 247 Sports covering Ohio State football. Pat, we appreciate you stopping by.
Absolutely. Thank you.